It's a pleasure to be here. It's been 4 years since I last visited Berlin, and I'm super nervous, so I think I'm going to ramble. Let's just dive right into the slides. The reason I'm nervous today is also because typically I talk about the project that I have finished, so I would have really cool images, and I would be like, okay, maybe what I'm talking about doesn't make sense, but at least the images are good. But with this project, I just started it. I don't have any images. I'm just going to talk. And since this is an idea that is still in development, I'm really looking forward to get your feedback on this. The project is titled Dark Botany. It's an idea that I had for about 6 years. Earlier, the name was Black Botany, but then Black Lives Matter happened, and then Black Botany became a completely different, it had a different meaning, so I turned it back to Dark Botany. It's actually not a dark project, it's a lot about light. And the project is an example of what I call speculative biology. It's a term that I coined during my PhD, inspired by speculative design, which is a subfield of design, perhaps like a post-consumerist, critical thinking way of design. But I'm just going to read the dictionary definition that I wrote. It's a multidisciplinary, multimodal, multi-layered, often multinational knowledge production system that lies at the intersection of speculative design, synthetic biology, and cultural criticism. Speculative biology currently involves design of living systems. Therefore, it could start with cells, can go to tissues, it could be about organs, organisms, and could lead up to an ecosystem altogether. So in the past 15 years, sometimes without knowing what I'm doing, I've been actually creating a lot of these biological entities. So at the organ level, I think the first design I had was Neolobium. I'm going to show an image. Stomaximus Plus Scepter. Whenever there's a TM next to the name, it means that it's a synthetic design. It's human-made. At the organism level, I came up with a creature called Swole, Pantone birds, and Pacific balloon turtle. And at the ecosystem level, I currently have 2 projects. One is an ecosystem of excess, which was premiered here in Berlin in 2013, and Dark Botany, which I'm talking to you about today. Just kind of like, to give an idea of what speculative biology is, I'm going to talk about a couple organs that I made. And oops, let's go back. The first one is Neolobium. This is an idea, project that I came up with in 2006, 2007, finally realized in 2008. It's a sexual organ that can be attached to an XY or an XX body. And it's heavily inspired by the female genitals, basically, but it's more advanced in that, as the name suggests, it has multiple labia, and it has a lot more nerve endings in these labia than what we normally have. And I was really interested in designing genitalia for a while when I was exploring gender identity, what it means to be, male or a female, the cultural definitions of it, etc. So it's an old project. Fast forward 15 years, now we've come a long way. I don't think the project is as effective anymore. Another organ that I designed was Plus Scepter, and this is basically a part of an ecosystem of excess. An ecosystem of excess was a project that targeted plastic pollution in the oceans. And I was really struck by the fact that there's this floating nexus of plastic waste in the middle of Pacific Ocean, also known as Pacific Trash Vortex. And I was thinking about a new ecosystem that emerges at the fusion of human-made, man-made plastic and organic matter that already exists in the ocean. I was thinking about the possibility of new life forms emerging in this contemporary primordial ooze. So Plus Scepter belongs to that, and it's a sense organ that can detect plastics, basically. Stomaximus was another organ that belonged to that ecosystem, the plastic ecosystem. And I'm actually currently working on this, hoping to realize it by this fall. And it's a maximized stomach that can digest plastics. So these are, again, old ideas from 2013. At the organism level, so those were organs. At the organism level, one creature that I am very much fond of is Pacific balloon turtle. So this was also inspired by plastic pollution and a paper that I read about how, given the option between clear plastic waste and colored plastic waste, marine turtles almost always opt for the colored plastics. Now, that's a sad fact, but they do prefer eating colored plastics, and especially balloons. Now, in California, where I'm coming from, there is this interesting type of pollution called balloon pollution. Because back there, we love celebrating our joys and emotions, etc., by releasing balloons in the air, and then they fly away and end up in the Pacific. Then the marine turtles find them and eat them, and they basically suffer through a lingering death because their digestive tract is clogged. So in this version, in this organism, I was hoping to come up with a novel digestive tract so that the marine turtles could survive plastic waste. Another creature, and I actually really like this one, is Swole. And this was my attempt to come up with like a kitchen utensil / creature that can offer us a constant supply of eggs every 28 hours. And again, living in the States, I was, encountering this fact called cage-free chicken. And having come from Europe to the States, I was like, okay, what is going on with this cage-free concept? And I spent about a year doing research on what happens to industrialized chicken farms and what happens to chicken that are actually in these facilities. Then I discovered that the chicken, also Latin name Gallus domesticus, goes through this process where they are experiencing muscular atrophy because they're like confined in a very tiny space, about 18 inches by like 7 inches. They go through all kinds of neurodegenerative diseases, and they are basically living a horrible life, since the whole animal is designed to move and look for food, but when it's confined in this space, it can't move, right? And I made this connection between how we punish ourselves as well, how we punish humans. When we want to punish someone, we take their freedom away, and that usually translates to taking their movement away, and that's how we invented prison. So I thought, well, we love eggs. This is a thing that's not going to go away. Perhaps we can cancel out the unnecessary parts, namely the brain, and all the sense organs that actually aid with, recognizing a complex three-dimensional space, and all the action organs that are like legs, wings, etc. So what's left is what I call biological minimalism. It's basically, an animal you can put next to your kettle. It doesn't have a nervous system, so it doesn't feel anything, right? And it has an output hole where you can get an egg every 28 hours. At the ecosystem level, an ecosystem of excess was my first attempt at designing an ecosystem. And coming from architecture and design, I have to say it was a very daunting task to design an ecosystem. I haven't finished it yet. Now, today, the project that I'm going to talk about is primarily, focused on climate change. It's another subject, a passion of mine, to follow what's going on with climate change and think about its impact on us humans, but also non-human animals and all living things, right? So in that regard, this is a title from this magazine I brought with myself, Chemical Engineering magazine. Time is not on our side, published in 2019. And working on climate change, I also had a couple projects where I was really focused on raising awareness. Because for the longest time, I had this notion that artist communication, I'm an artist who cares about climate change, well, maybe I should raise awareness by making artworks about climate change. So the Very Loud Chamber Orchestra of Endangered Species is, again, on a project from around 2013, where I picked top 14 species who would be probably going extinct by 2030, and if not 2050. And I made this kind of interesting chamber orchestra of these animals that vocalize the change in temperature. So this was a sonification project in a way. I was getting data from 1960s to 2008, and I turned it into sound, and I was able to, use the mandibles of these skulls to scream out that data. So actually, I think I was trying to fear condition people who were exposed to this. Another project of mine from that time is global warming hot yoga studio. So I wasn't super happy with how the Very Loud Chamber Orchestra went. And I thought, well, I think I want to do something where people can really feel the effect of global warming or climate change or climate crisis. So I literally designed a yoga studio. The red light that you see there is actually infrared lamps. So when you walk towards the global warming sign, it's hot, and you're supposed to sweat, right? So this has been shown all around the globe, and there have been performances where people practice yoga. I don't have much time, so I'm going to play maybe like 10 seconds of this film that I made that accompanies the process. So the idea is that we get together, we follow a script, and the script informs us about, whoa, that is loud, particulate matter, impact of global warming on ecosystems, etc. Now, another project that was really focused on climate change was Ktai AI, Artificial Intelligence for Governance. This was a fictitious character I came up with, an AI that chose to have the look of a kitten, and it lives on your mobile phones, and it's become the first non-human governor ever after 2030, when global temperatures rise 1.5 degrees Celsius. There's all kinds of things that happen, and EU decides to put Ktai AI in charge. So it's a film. I'm not going to play it, but it was also about climate change. Now with Dark Botany, I'll try to talk about it in 3 chapters. The first one is seeds. So how did I come up with this idea? What are the seeds of this idea? It's basically this kind of, how to say it, the clock, the awareness that within 8 years, if we don't take drastic action and apply some hardcore policy changes, in about 8 years, by 2030, I'm hoping most of us will be alive by then, the global temperatures will rise up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So now, that doesn't feel like much, like 1.5 degrees Celsius. Maybe it's a good thing, right? Because our body temperature is 36.5, 1.5, we can handle it. But actually, when you think about it, I'm going to put this magazine down. it's pretty bad in that there are two really important things in biological systems. One is temperature, and the other one is acidity. Now, if we play with the temperature, we'll be playing with a lot of biological systems, especially reproduction, and it's really not good. I'll actually read from this chart that I have here. Apparently, by 2030, if no action is taken, there will be a drop in freshwater resources. Here in this diagram, we're only looking at Mediterranean, but there's also a Middle Eastern version of this. It's pretty bad. The rainfall, heavy rainfall, is increasing or decreasing depending on where you are. Extreme weather is a normal thing. It's not extreme anymore. It's the new normal. But then there's also another, hidden issue, which is food. Wheat production declines, maize production declines, right? Certain produce goes up, like soy and rice, but in general, there is going to be a heavy impact on how food is produced by 2030. Now, the sea levels, that's the other thing. We all talk about this. 40 centimeters, again, it's not that much. But when you think about it, around the coastal regions, there is a huge negative impact on marine ecosystems. I'm not even thinking about how it, impacts people that are living in coastlines. And this item is also very interesting. Coral bleaching, by 2030, 90% is gone. If no action is taken from 2030 to 2050, 98% of coral reefs are gone. The rainfall is going up. Extreme weather gets really messy, right? Sea level rise, again, it looks like 10 centimeters. Okay, it's not that much, but when you think about it at the ecosystem level, it's actually a lot. And I don't know. By 2050, if the temperatures, global temperatures, raise 2 degrees Celsius, we will be losing a lot of species that we enjoy. Say goodbye to all the Arctic species. This is from ESA's website. They're estimating that by 2050, there will be no ice in the Arctic. This means the end of all Arctic species, basically. And at this point, I just wanted to put this comparison. I remember that ad, Coca-Cola 1993. I was a kid, and CGI wasn't a thing back then. I remember marveling at this ad, thinking, polar bears drinking Coca-Cola, watching Aurora Borealis. It's so cute. But fast forward, right, how many years that is? 24 years. That's what happens to actual polar bears. And a side note here is this I took from Coca-Cola's website, so the actual numbers might be a lot bigger than this. Coca-Cola adds 5.24 million metric tons of greenhouse gases pretty much every year. That's from 2020. It's bigger in 2021. Actually, they're claiming it's gone down, but I'm not going to make big corporate claims here, so I'm going to move on. But that is an interesting coincidence there. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, with all that data, and given my anxious personality type, I started freaking out. I was like, oh my God, okay, I've been trying to raise awareness with my art. I'm not sure how effective it is. Maybe I should move from the awareness space to solution space. Can I do that? So I was, really intrigued by this term called NETs, much better than NFTs. It's negative emissions technologies. And if you look at any report that uses IPCC or how global CO2 levels will rise by 2050, any prediction algorithm, any paper on this, you come across negative emissions technologies. This is basically the dictionary definition is these are technologies that will permanently remove the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide from the Earth's atmosphere. There are 4 major techniques. I'm not going to go into detail. And I'm focusing on the last one, which is basically using biological systems to capture carbon. Side note, I was amused by these 2 graphics. One of them is trying to catch CO2 with a net. It's gas, net won't work. And the other one is just like dialing CO2 as if it's, you know, some music, I don't know. So I thought that was interesting. Now, how do we take NETs and combine it with another passion of mine, which is synthetic biology? I'm a big fan of Freeman Dyson, who is a visionary British thinker. And he claimed in a 2007 paper called Our Biotech Future that domesticated biotechnology will become a common thing. And just like, you know, the history of personal computing, most of us would be able to genetically modify organisms in our kitchen, etc. And then in 2013, CRISPR happened, so it's actually really possible. Now, that was the seeds of the idea. Now, let's focus on the leaves of this project. One fact is that photosynthesis is not efficient. We live in a culture of efficiency and progress, and I'm sad to find out that photosynthesis fails us. The efficiency of photosynthesis is only 11%. Now, with dark botany, with the alterations I'm going to talk about in the next 3 minutes, it will be possible to increase the efficiency to up to 50%. There is a ton of research that goes into plant microbiology, molecular biology, that is trying to come up with different types of crops that can, capture more photons, even in the shade, and turn solar energy into chemical bonds, basically building cellulose, building, sugars, lipids, etc., that we all ingest. And the research is there, it's happening, but it's not fast enough. So how can we come up with a more efficient photosynthesis? Then we have to think about chlorophyll, the green pigment. Actually, if you think about the entire ecological movement, we also call it green movement, right? There's the Green Party. So the color, chlorophyll's color green is very important in our thinking, in environmental thinking. But sadly, apparently chlorophyll isn't that efficient. It's green. What does that mean? It's reflecting the highest energy band in the electromagnetic, visible electromagnetic spectrum, and it's only capturing blue and red light. So to increase the efficiency of photosynthesis, we have to capture the entirety of the spectrum. So the goal is basically absorbing the entirety of the light spectrum as a source for accelerated photosynthesis. Now, what are the applications that we can come up with? Number 1, agriculture. Some sad statistics, 45% of agricultural activity on Earth is only to feed livestock. This means a lot of land being used to just make meat, right? If those crops that are fed to livestock had black leaves, what we call dark chlorophyll, and had a higher efficiency, at least we would be, subsidize the cost of that, right? So that's one thing, agriculture, crops with black leaves. The second application can be urban environments, such as public parks. You might enter a dark park where you feel really safe and happy because you're in the midst of heightened, super efficient carbon capture. Another application is algae. So algae is super helpful for us, and they also are green, right? They come in different colors, but the main one is green. So if there were black algae, we might be also increasing carbon capture by algae. Now, what are the consequences? The good consequences are we reach carbon capture goals by 2050. There will be faster growth with plants. This might actually help feeding 10 billion people. it could look cool, especially if you're into techno or if you're an architect, black is your color. Bad consequences. These species can get out of hand. Botanicide, it's a term that I love. Torturing plants could happen. We might be destroying native species. Ecosystem rupture can happen. And again, if you're not into black, if you're more like a color person, you might not like how it looks. I'm at my last slide. So I mentioned multiple applications. This chart summarizes this. The pigment, black pigment, is called anthocyanin, and actually there are a lot of plants that have this pigment, that express this pigment. Another fun fact is that because of UV radiation, increased levels of UV radiation, most plants are kind of moving towards black already. Now, the roots, the last part. The roots. If you want to really kill a plant, you have to burn its roots. The roots are the most vital part of the plant. But then when I was thinking about the roots, I realized that plants use the roots to, secure themselves, to get food from the soil, to basically stay alive, but they also use it to communicate with each other. And root, the word is very ingrained in our culture. We have so many expressions that use roots, right? Oh, I'm rooted in this culture, or what's the root of that idea, etc. I think by 2050, with the 2 degrees Celsius up, a lot of us will be rootless. We will become rootless, we will become seedless, and we will lose our leaves. I think that looking at the plant world can be a new way of looking at global human mobility, which will be increasing under higher temperature. Migration, immigration, brain drain, climate change refugees, war refugees, homelessness, houselessness, these can all be considered as forms of rootlessness. I'm a rootless person, I have to say. I was born in Turkey, I've traveled all across the world, I'm brain drained, right? I sometimes feel the impact of it, but not so much. We just witnessed a huge war, Ukraine's still under war, refugees coming to Europe all the time, more rootless people. So I just want to offer the plant vocabulary to look at that as well. Thank you so much. There's a film, I'm going to play it, but I'm also happy to answer questions or get feedback from you. Thank you.
We want to bring the plant world into the public eye and public heart. Plant sensing, plant hormones, plant communication and intelligence, the inner world of plants remain a scientific mystery. However, plants are the most common genetically modified organisms. Transgenic crops are all around us. We don't seem to have a problem with plants as GMO. The molecular basis of plant life is fascinating. It's an interesting coincidence that the rules of heredity were discovered via close study of pea plants by Gregor Mendel in 1800s. Altering plant biology in the service of humans is an old concept. What's new is designing a plant ecosystem for the sole purpose of stopping climate change. Whatever solutions we ought to have for climate crisis, we ought to have them now. The next 28 years are very critical for us. By 2050, without new policies, global greenhouse gas emissions are projected to increase by 50%, primarily due to a 70% growth in energy-related carbon dioxide emissions.
Hi, my name is Bridget and I'm a scientist here at UC San Diego. Can photosynthesis be made more efficient? Plants on Earth are actually green due to the abundance of green light. They absorb mostly red and blue wavelengths, but reflect the excess green light that they have, which in turn is what we see with our eyes. Plants are going to need to evolve to absorb a much larger range of wavelengths, and by absorbing a lot more wavelengths of light in varying colors, they will begin to appear darker and eventually black.